Hey there, everybody. Let me see, that light's better, a little better. There we go. I'm here at the Virginia Monument, and in other words, the Robert E. Lee Monument, as some may know of it or think about it, because of course that's him prominently displayed on horseback up at the top of the monument. I just had a few thoughts to share about him, and I'm over here to the side as to not offend anybody, because almost anything I say will probably offend or could possibly offend somebody. First I want to dispel a couple myths about Robert E. Lee and slavery. And there are a lot of quotes by both him and Lincoln that if you look up online, Snopes or something like that will try to tell you, or out of context or what have you. They're really generally not. Just some basic facts. In 1829, he did own a handful of slaves. Not to trivialize it, but he did own a small number. In 1829, his mom died, and at that time she owned about 30 slaves. Lee had siblings, so he inherited about 10 at that time. 2 years later, he marries Mary Ann Randolph Custis, and her father was definitely a big slave owner. Her father, G.W. Pike Custis, he owned over 100. So he was this light stinks, sorry. He was a pretty big slave owner. Now, however, that didn't make Robert E. Lee the owner. He, at one point, being the son-in-law, did help to manage some of the slaves between Arlington House and a couple other places. And I don't think he was really too fond of the whole business as such, as evidenced by some quotes later in life, not too much later in life. In the next following years, he became enlisted in the Army, and as he was getting ready for the Mexican War, he wrote a will that basically freed of most of the handful of remaining slaves that he had. By the mid to late 40s, all that anybody, gosh, this light stinks, all that anybody can really prove is at that point he owned, I think, 1 slave. Somebody can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I think maybe by 1853 or 52, his father-in-law, G.W. Pike Custis, finally died, and a lot of slaves were left to Robert E. Lee in his will to manage. Now, again, he was not the owner of those slaves, but he was left to manage some of them, and he called it an unpleasant business. So just to lay those facts out there, and to remind everybody that another point about this whole mess about slavery was that Lincoln was no abolitionist. I think I've already gone over this, but if I haven't, he was absolutely not an abolitionist. He was not someone of the strain of, say, your of Garrison, or some of the others, from Massachusetts, Henry Lloyd Garrison, who were fervently anti-slavery and abolitionists far to the left. Lincoln tried really to, as quite often, be the politician, and to try to be ambivalent and to walk a tightrope, but he was certainly not in the camp who wanted to abolish slavery right away, at least not until the war started. Can I get better light? I guess that's a little bit better. He also, as I like to remind people, proposed sending the blacks to Iberia. So, my whole point behind this is that the views, for not all, there were certainly some fire eaters from the South, of course, from the Deep South, and who were very racist and very, very staunch advocates of slavery. That's not to be negated at all. But many Southerners in the landed class, the business class, especially those from the northern South, had very, very similar views on the whole matter with a lot of Northerners, including people like Lincoln. Most folks, to be clear, did not see black people as equals. okay, and thought of them as an inferior race. But that gets mixed up with the business and the economics of slavery. These are really, sometimes they go together, but not always. Sometimes they're pretty much two different things. But that's not really quite what I wanted to talk about, and I already took up too much time. What I really wanted to talk about was, I've mentioned in some videos that I am rather in admiration of him as a leader, and that still absolutely stands. And see, right there, that's going to tick somebody off, but, so be it. I wanted to talk about him, and I've mentioned that his troops throughout the war all pretty much unanimously really revered him, and he had a lot of respect from all of his troops, and Lincoln can't say the same thing. This isn't a contest, but these are just some of my thoughts, some of my personal thoughts, okay? These are largely opinions, to be clear. But my fondness grows from the fact that as soon as he took the helm, don't forget he did not start the war as the supreme commander of the Confederate forces. That happened in '62 after the Battle of Seven Pines, when Johnston was severely wounded, and Lee was made commander. My biggest admiration comes from a pretty purely tactical standpoint, and that was that both the Union and the South were having real issues with commanders that dragged their feet. Of course, in the North, that was more than clear, and in the South, I think Johnston was kind of in the same vein. But when Lee took the helm, and this is the thing, I don't think that his personality was necessarily really aggressive, and that was his personal taste or his personal style. I think that it's pretty safe to say that he was also very pragmatic, and that the way that he understood the war, he really had no choice but to always stay on the offensive when he could. Now, he successfully defended Richmond the first time around during the Peninsula Campaign, and of course, in the end, as I always mention, because of sheer manpower and because of technology and marshaling resources, that would not hold out forever. Excuse me. But apart from defending the capital when he had to, and keep in mind, the capital isn't always the end-all be-all in a war. It's usually more of a psychological blow if it is captured or threatened. Not always necessarily the end-all be-all, though, of a war. But apart from defending Richmond when he felt like he had to, or when it was under real attack, he stayed on the offensive for one reason, and that's because he knew that the South was bound to fail. That he understood, much the way that I understand things, that because of sheer numbers, sheer resources, sheer commands of better railways, so on and so forth, that there was no way. I really hope anybody watching these videos doesn't think that there is really possibly any way on God's green earth that the Confederacy would win this war, because the chances are astronomical that it could not. No matter how you try to switch things around, and no matter how many what ifs you throw in there, it was pretty much a virtual guarantee that that they would never win, just because of manpower, resources, technology, so on and so forth. And since he understood this, that's why I believe, and many others believe, he always stayed on the offensive when he could. That is certainly the reasoning behind the Maryland campaigns or the Northern campaigns, and even going into the later part of the war in 1864, when he really threatened the capital again, as I've kind of covered and mentioned. When oh gosh, it wasn't Jeb Stuart. I'm sorry, I'm kind of, my mind's kind of fuzzy. I've been doing a lot of these lately. during the past day or two. But when he made the move up north into Maryland for the first, second, third time into Maryland and threatened the capital, which ended up as the Battle of Monocacy. That was again a really good ploy of his to draw Union troops out of Virginia, or as many troops away from Virginia as he could, and also a political move to strike fear into the heart of the North, and to put a real damper on Lincoln's re-election hopes. He was very, very pragmatic. He read a lot of Northern newspapers. He was often trying to hopefully, possibly get some assistance from Europe, as well, as if he were to be successful in any of these northern campaigns. My time is almost up, guys. There's a ton of stuff that I couldn't fit in here, and I may make another video here at the Virginia Monument, but if I don't, these are some thoughts to leave you guys with. And until the next one, I'll see ya.